The Tsar Bomba is widely regarded as the most powerful nuclear weapon ever created and detonated. Developed by the Soviet Union in the midst of the nuclear arms race with the United States, the hydrogen aerial bomb was dropped in 1961 from a Tu-95V aircraft above the dry nose cape of the Severny Island in Russia. The mission was supposed to be a secret, but a nearby American aircraft picked up on the 50-megaton blast. The Tsar Bomba would be the pinnacle of a series of high-yield thermonuclear weapons built by the US and the Soviet Union during the era, even leading to an increase in global radiation levels that called for new nuclear regulations. Rising tensions. When the United States detonated the first atomic bombs in 1945, they immediately established their nuclear superiority. But only 4 years later, the Soviet Union tested their first atomic bomb, intensifying what would become an exhausting nuclear arms race. The Soviets relied on significant espionage results, whether from sources inside the Manhattan Project or by recruiting several German scientists. But their achievements were startling nonetheless, and the entire world took notice. Before the first hydrogen bomb, the Soviets had tested no less than 85 atomic devices. President Harry S. Truman eventually called for an acceleration of the next stage of nuclear weaponry, the hydrogen bomb. This device would be more lethal than the atomic bomb by further developing the concept of nuclear fusion. In 1952, the US detonated the first hydrogen bomb in the Pacific. And only a year later, the Soviets responded with their own version. By 1955, the Soviet RDS-37 two-stage hydrogen bomb was launched, becoming the first weapon to reach megaton range. The nuclear arms race escalated to the point that in 1958, the first attempt at a ban treaty was discussed, and the two superpowers suspended nuclear testing for a brief period. However, the informal moratorium would be broken merely 3 years later by the Soviets. Development. Premier Nikita Khrushchev ordered the production of a 100-megaton bomb in July of 1961. The Soviet engineers had barely 14 weeks to build it before the first test was performed. While standard thermonuclear weapons composed 2 stages, this version would add a third one to increase its explosive power. Physicist Andrei Sakharov was part of a team of scientists who vouched for the reduction of the original plans by half, arguing that the weapon would be excessively potent and could harm the Soviet Union. Consequently, the device was reduced to 50 megatons, still the most powerful bomb ever created. The bomb's official name was Product 602, and it was designed to use radiation implosion with a 2-part multi-stage structure fueled by dry or solid lithium-6 deuteride. This would significantly increase the hydrogen concentration and thus the chances of fusion. The device was 26 feet long by a radius of 6 feet 11 inches and weighed 60,000 pounds. Product 602 initially consisted of a first stage with a nuclear charge followed by a thermonuclear reaction and a fast fission process producing 1.5 megatons. The next stages, projected to 50 megatons each, were reduced using lead tempers instead of uranium-238 fusion ones, which scattered the neutrons and therefore limited the resulting explosion and fallout. In addition, the fast fission process was eliminated, and 97% of the total yield would be produced by the thermonuclear fission, rendering it one of the cleanest nuclear weapons ever built in terms of fallout to yield contrast. Ready to launch. The test was programmed for October 30th, 1961. The hydrogen charge was planned to explode at a high altitude above the ground. A fall retardation parachute device was implemented in the aircraft's tail to allow the crew to flee unscathed, but their chances of survival were calculated at 50%. The massive weapon was transported in a special train wagon. It was then loaded onto a trailer and moved to the airfield at the Kola Peninsula. Further testing of the automatic equipment and technical control was carried out in a designated building. A millionth of a second could make a huge difference when the charge was triggered, so the system had to be perfectly accurate. The bomb would be airdropped to demonstrate deliverability. A Tu-95 long-range heavy bomber was chosen for the task and painted with a special white coat to protect it from thermal radiation. Measuring instruments were also installed to track heat and shock pulse. A flying lab would accompany the carrier aircraft, fully equipped with telemetering instruments, shockwave pressure recorders, oscilloscopes, magnetic tape recorders, calorimeters, and movie cameras. The designated area was State Testing Site No. 6 of the Soviet Union's Ministry of Defense at Novaya Zemlya Island in the Arctic Sea. The location provided safe natural conditions for an experiment of this magnitude. The headquarters, labs, and support services were located at an underground management post in Belushia Bay, 260 kilometers from the testing grounds, and a concentration of marine logistics vessels was deployed for support. The test's main objective was to record and measure the explosion parameters, so cameras were positioned 20 kilometers from the site. The shockwave effect was not a priority, so no structures or military equipment were placed at the site. The underground facilities would record the behavior of the nuclear explosion, including its neutron multiplying factor, and would employ time interval meters for the automatic charge devices. All the equipment would be automatically controlled via radio signals from the D8 site, an underground automation service site that housed a program-controlled machine with installed commands in determined sequences. Hours before the detonation, the personnel was evacuated and the maritime support location was thoroughly revised. The Air Defense Service also checked the meteorological conditions, with particular attention to the direction of the wind. After a final general inspection, the bomb was suspended under the aircraft's fuselage, using a special device crafted for a smooth and even lift. The pieces were all set, and the crew was given a final briefing. Then the carrier aircraft and the flying lab took off. Release. The aircraft flew parallel at an altitude of 10,500 meters. Continuous two-way communication was maintained at all times, and when they were approaching the site, flight control and communications were transferred to the command post. The bomber was now on combat course, and its target was visible. The bomb release control was switched to automatic mode, and the signal would come from the program-controlled machine at the D8 site. As the program-controlled machine received the release signal, the crew put on their protective glasses. At last, the bomb was released. The device's parachute deployed as planned, and the bomb approached its detonation point at 4 kilometers high. The explosion then happened in a bright flash. The aircraft were 45 kilometers away and instantly lost 1 kilometer of altitude due to the shockwave. Still, they regained control. The intense glow was visible from as far as 1,000 kilometers, and a dust column rose from the ground, covering almost 10 kilometers in diameter. A fire dome was also visible from the aircraft 250 kilometers away. The fire slowly increased in volume to about 20 kilometers before morphing into an imposing mushroom cloud. Aftermath. A few hours after the detonation, a reconnaissance helicopter flew to the site and checked for radioactivity before the test teams approached the area in ships. Dozens of kilometers were affected, and the entrances to the underground instrumentation bases were scorched. Even though the bomb was set off at 4 kilometers above the ground, a seismic shockwave equivalent to a 5.0 earthquake was detected worldwide, and it circled the globe 3 times. The mission was intended to be a secret, but it was detected by an American KC-135A reconnaissance aircraft known as Speedlight Alpha, which got so close that its anti-radiation paint scorched. The Tsar Bomba yielded 50 megatons, or about 1,570 times the combined energy of the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. Its immense proportions and power rendered it impractical for military use, and it was never deployed. Moreover, it was impossible to launch via ballistic missiles, and remained a one-time display of force. During the following 16 months, the United States and the Soviet Union conducted numerous nuclear tests. A spike in global radiation levels followed, as well as the escalation of political frictions that led to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Moscow and Washington eventually proposed a de-escalation, and in 1963, a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty was signed. This agreement limited nuclear testing in the atmosphere, space, and under the sea, only allowing for underground tests from then on. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our Dark Documentary channels and give us a like. And don't forget to let us know about specific subjects you'd like to see featured in our videos.